The Buffalo Bills make a massive move and fire Sean McDermott, but they fired the wrong guy, and I'll explain on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso, with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's show, we're going to talk about all of the fallout coming out of a crazy divisional round weekend. The Houston Texans have a CJ Stroud problem. The Denver Broncos are doomed against the Patriots, but the Buffalo Bills make massive waves in the NFL on Monday and fire Sean McDermott, but I think they fired the wrong guy. Before we dive in, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen, and thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. We get the news that Sean McDermott is fired, and my guy Joe Marino from Locked On Bills broke it down.
Wow. The Buffalo Bills fired Sean McDermott, but Brandon Beane is staying as general manager and will lead the head coach search, according to Ian Rappaport. I am stunned. Not that a decision was made to let go of Beane or McDermott, but that Beane is the one that stays. I would argue that clearly the personnel issues with this team have been bigger than anything that Sean McDermott has done or not done as head coach, but he's the one that gets the axe. Beane survives McDermott. Josh Allen is going to have a new head coach. All this success, but not the ultimate success, and it costs Sean McDermott his job. We will have all the coverage you could possibly ever imagine over at Locked On Bills. Make sure that you're subscribed. The content is coming.
McDermott may only be 8-8 in the playoffs, but he has one of the highest winning percentages in the NFL right now, multiple division titles during his time in Buffalo. He is a good football coach, and I agree with what Joe is saying right there. Like, the big shocker here is that Brandon Beane survived this as well, and not only that, he got a promotion, Lauren, and that's just an absolute shocker to me. If I had to choose between the two, I would have fired Brandon Beane far before I fired Sean McDermott.
100%. And it's always a bad sign for an organization when they put out the official letter from the owner and there's a typo in the first sentence.
Oh, no.
He did an admiral job, not admirable, but admiral, like a Navy captain. It said Sean did an admiral job. Aye, Captain. Doesn't seem like everything is, all the T's are dotted and the I's are crossed here in Buffalo with this move. I mean, this is totally different to me than Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh, where it's like they've been there for a while. Yeah, they win a lot of games, but they never do anything in the playoffs. Like the Bills at least are winning playoff games and making advancements. It's tough to win AFC championship games. Somebody's got to lose all of those. So McDermott certainly hadn't worn out his welcome in Buffalo or lost the team by any means.
No, he didn't lose the locker room, and the way that guys reacted after they lost, the raw emotion, the anger that players were showing, it shows that guys really did care. And you got to look at, when we talk about the reasons why Buffalo didn't win that game, Josh Allen did not play well. He had a bunch of bad turnovers. But I continue to look at their lack of talent at wide receiver, their lack of talent on the outside specifically, doomed them multiple times in this game. Brandon Cooks should have made that catch on the sideline. A good wide receiver is able to double tap those. And look, Brandon Cooks was a good wide receiver at a time, but he was their #1 outside receiver for this playoff run. And we're talking about Brandon Cooks, who has been on the scrap heap at the end of the season. The fact that he was never able to give Josh Allen a good threat after making the move to get rid of Stephon Diggs is just absolutely insane. And you look at Maxwell Hairston, TJ Sanders, Landon Jackson, Deion Walker, Jordan Hancock. Then you go down, Keon Coleman, what a disaster. Cole Bishop, okay player. Dwayne Carter, Ray Davis, okay player. Cedric Van Prawn, what? Dalton Kincaid, okay player. Osiris Torrance, Dorian Williams, Justin Shorter. Those are the last 3 drafts for the Buffalo Bills, and they have been outright disasters. He's never been able to get a dominant alpha pass rusher on the line of scrimmage for the defense as well. And Sean McDermott took this group that had a bunch of injuries and different things happen and got them to be the number one pass defense in the NFL, and they were outright dominant in the second half of games in regard to pass defense. So it's like when you're starting to make the blame pie of why the Buffalo Bills underachieved this year, I have a hard time not starting the pyramid at the bottom with Brandon Beane for the roster issues.
Yeah, I think there's two separate things here, right? There's a separate conversation about whether Sean McDermott was doing a good enough job as a coach or not, and then also whether or not he was being put in a tough spot. Like, I know Bills fans have been frustrated with McDermott for a while and feeling like, well, maybe they would like to move on at some point, but the understanding was always like, well, yeah, but Beane's got to go too then. Like, it's like that Beane is the bigger problem, and you could say McDermott is also a problem or part of the problem, but like getting rid of him doesn't solve the other bigger problems here. And I'm left wondering, like, do you think they consult Josh Allen before they make this move? Do you think this happens with Josh Allen's approval and say, Josh, do you think we should, like, does Josh endorse this from ownership, or do they say, screw it, he's the player, we're in charge, we're going to make this decision, and he's going to like it?
I think there's only one path that would validate that as a possibility, and that is if they promote Joe Brady or bring back Brian Daboll. You know what I mean? Like, those are guys who had success with Josh Allen. They're offensive guys. They likely have a better connection with Josh Allen just because they simply work with him more, have more touch points with him on a day-to-day basis. And that's really where you go from here. And you're right, though, Lauren. That's the thing for me. It's not, okay, if you want to move on from Sean McDermott, you think there's a change that needs to happen. I can understand that entirely. But not only did they keep Brandon Beane around during that, but they promoted him the president of football operations. Like, they gave him an increase in power and an increase in title, which is just makes this even more absurd to me. But it does, your question does lend us to going forward here. Like, what do the Bills do next? And you wonder if a guy like Joe Brady, who was going to get some head coach consideration, would just be a natural promotion. Brian Daboll being on the market, would you bring him back? If they don't bring back, or not bring back for Joe Brady, but if they don't promote Joe Brady or bring back Brian Daboll, I mean, where do you even go from here in terms of upgrading your coach? Where is the upgrade on Sean McDermott? I just don't see it in this current market.
Yeah, there's not anybody who's like been more successful. Like, you're never going to find that. All you're hoping is for somebody who can, rearrange the deck chairs on this Titanic and have it miss the iceberg somehow. But I don't even know. Like, there's not you're not going to go like Mike McDaniel or some other offensive guy that's in the division, like that, to try and get more and squeeze more. Like, who can squeeze more out of this group? I mean, McDermott was the one who brought in Brian Daboll and brought in Joe Brady and has seen those guys go on to get head coaching jobs and opportunities. Like, he hasn't done that bad of a job, and now you're competing with everybody else for the same group of candidates that wasn't even that strong to begin with. And it sounds like Tomlin's not even an option at this point because he wants to take a year off. So now you're trying a fresh, bright, young face to hope that he's going to be better. But boy, the devil seems to be a lot better than the devil you don't here.
Yeah, Chris Shula, Jesse Minter. Maybe they can find a way to steal Jeff Hafley away from Miami, which seems like a pairing that's going to materialize here in the next 24 hours. And heck, by the time you hear this, ladies and gentlemen, on Tuesday morning, Jeff Hafley might already be the coach of the Miami Dolphins. And if you're not looking at that, you're going to go get Robert Saleh. How is Robert Saleh an upgrade on Sean McDermott when Sean McDermott has hired better offensive coordinators than Robert Saleh was able to in New York? Now, did those coordinators get forced on him in New York after Mike LaFleur, like Nathaniel Hackett? That was a Rodgers guy. Maybe that was an arranged marriage by the ownership. That's a worthy conversation, but I just don't see how you could make an argument with John Harbaugh off the table here. If they wanted to go to Harbaugh, I would have been like, okay, that could make some sense. I could see that, maybe, but I just don't see any kind of upgrade here. And if you're Josh Allen, yeah, you do got to wonder, like, where are we going from here? And did they have me in mind when they did this? And no matter who you hire as a coach, if Beane doesn't find a way to get more weapons on this team and get more of an alpha pass rusher, things aren't going to improve.
And like, what was like the hurry to make this change now? Like, it's one thing if you feel like, okay, championship window is going to close here, right? But like, some people would argue it maybe already kind of did. Like, they're kind of in this like they got to retool situation anyway. So like, it's not like, oh, we gotta go all in to get somebody to put us over the top. Like, it feels like, if anything, this is like resetting and going backwards to try and like tear things down and build up from ground up. It just doesn't make a lot of directional sense for the organization.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of is that they have somebody in mind they want to take a huge swing on that they think is like an elite talent that's not available yet. Maybe like a Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. I know he said he was going to stay in Notre Dame in a press conference last week, but, money talks, so maybe Dan Lanning from Oregon, maybe they want to pull somebody from college and do something crazy. But yeah, it's hard to see how this is going to get better for the Buffalo Bills. Very strange move in Buffalo, but we're going to continue looking at the fallout from the divisional round weekend. And unfortunately, Denver Broncos fans, you may have won the battle, but it looks like you probably lost the war. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Indeed sponsored jobs. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone for this show, which I don't because I got Lauren and that's all I need, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job get the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Again, that's Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now, and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed from this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Today's episode is also brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Try a trade every play. With Robinhood, now available across the U.S., download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. All right, football fans, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. Again, we talked about Buffalo blowing it up, and I think they made a mistake and fired the wrong guy. But now we got to move to the team that beat the Buffalo Bills, and that was the Denver Broncos. But as most of you have probably heard by now, the Broncos got tough news immediately after the game with Bo Nix having a broken bone in his ankle and most likely needing to have surgery. Actually will have surgery, and that's something that's going to happen on Tuesday. But now that means Jarrett Stidham, their backup quarterback, comes into focus. And my guy Cody Roark from Locked On Broncos talked about the prospects for the Broncos and why they're not dead in the water with Jarrett Stidham.
I think you can be skeptical and say, I don't know how Denver's going to stack up against New England without Bo. I think it's fair to have those questions, but to say that they don't have a chance, we've seen some stranger things happen in the NFL, and it's not like it's this unworldly chance. We're not talking about the Broncos relying on Chad Kelly of all people to lead them to the Super Bowl. Here's the thing about Jarrett Stidham. He's experienced in Sean Payton's system, and one thing that Sean told us was that Stidham is ready. He'll be ready for the moment because he's been in the system for 3 years, and Denver's going to put together a game plan. I think when you look at Sean Payton historically, when Drew Brees has gone down with an injury, other quarterbacks in New Orleans have gone down. What have we seen happen? We've seen guys like Teddy Bridgewater, Taysom Hill step up, and the Saints offense still find ways to win games. We've seen Jameis Winston step in, and the Saints still find ways to win games here. Yes, it is a big blow that Bo is not going to be available. I can't overstate that enough here. But to act like Denver doesn't have a chance, I think that's wrong.
all right, Denver does have a chance. I'm not going to mathematically eliminate them from this. The defense is awesome. And look, the Texans' defense was so good, they almost got them back in the game against the Patriots. I made a joke during the game, Lauren, that the Patriots after halftime should have just knelt the whole time just to make sure that the Texans' defense couldn't find a way to put points up on the board when CJ Stroud was just absolutely throwing the game. And we'll talk about Stroud, and Houston has a problem with CJ Stroud. We'll talk about that at the end of the show, but Denver's defense is good enough with the home crowd and the home field advantage to maybe keep them in the game. But I'm sorry, I just can't, functionally, yes, Denver has a chance, but realistically, there's just no way that the Patriots are going to blow this game against Denver with Jarrett Stidham, right?
Yeah, it feels like it has to be a miracle moment, right? Like, which crazy things have happened in the playoffs. Like, Cody's right about that.
Right.
Like, Denver just doesn't seem like the kind of situation right now where you could just plug in a game manager, and if you just take care of the football and let the rest of your offense carry the quarterback the rest of the way, that they're going to beat the New England Patriots, right? They could absolutely win games against lesser opponents with Jarrett Stidham at quarterback. They're a good enough team to beat some teams with him throwing short and checking down and stuff. But like, Denver was not running the ball particularly well last week, and they haven't been as consistent in the ground game as of late, that just, feel like you can just have him turn and hand it off and run the ball 30 times and let that carry your young quarterback. Like, they're going to need the Broncos weapons to play better than they've played the last few weeks. And same thing at receiver. Like, Courtland Sutton's a great player, and Mims has made some nice plays, but like, can they single-handedly create the plays for their offense if the quarterback isn't giving them something above and beyond special? Like, it just feels like, well, the Patriots are flawed. They're a good enough team that they shouldn't have too much trouble unless Stidham pulls off this miracle game and looks like, this absolute stud that's been hiding on the bench.
And I think this moment requires us to give Bo Nix credit that he doesn't normally get. Like, Bo Nix isn't an elite quarterback at this stage, in my opinion, but Bo Nix makes plays sometimes, and Bo Nix uses his legs. He'll create out of structure and get things done. So it's like, I'm not going to sit up here and act like I've been a big Bo Nix supporter throughout the first 2 years of his career, but Bo Nix is a starting quarterback in the NFL, and he is much better than Jarrett Stidham, and he does do some things that really do help the Denver Broncos. But I think your point is so smart, Lauren. This isn't like the Philadelphia Eagles offense, where they have this great run game that they can rely on. They are potentially going to get J.K. Dobbins back in this game. His practice window was opened. Whether he's activated, that will be something that we probably hear more about later in the week. But like, Courtland Sutton, great player. I know that you were just, going through the thing. I think Courtland Sutton is a good player, but for most of that game, he was irrelevant. He had 4 catches for 50-some yards, and all of those came in the second half. Like, he really didn't make any noise early on. I know, like you mentioned, Marvin Mims is a good player, speed, good threat, but they just simply don't have the level of offense that can win around a backup quarterback. I agree with you 100% on that. Now, when you do look at the New England Patriots, if we're expecting the New England Patriots to be able to take care of business here, that's great. But we also have to acknowledge Drake May has not played that well in this playoffs. It's not like he's been incredible by any stretch of the imagination. He's got it done, but for the most part, the Patriots defense has been way more impressive. They got all those turnovers off CJ Stroud. They absolutely wrecked a terrible offensive line of the Los Angeles Chargers. I know that I'm a bitter, petty Titans fan who doesn't want to give Mike Vrabel and the Patriots his credit, blah, 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 blah. I know how that goes, but at the same time, we can be honest and say it's not like Drake May has played MVP level football like he played during the season. So I'm looking at the Patriots, and it's like, I do expect them to get past the Broncos, but I don't really think that I give the Patriots a great chance against either of the teams in the NFC.
I agree. Like, from New England's standpoint, like, they're in a better position to like not have to lean on their quarterback, right? They can run the ball a little bit better. I guess their weapons aren't anything to write home about, but I think they can rely on the running game and defense a little bit more than Denver can. But it kind of continues this, like, they've been getting very lucky in terms of the opponents that they've had to face, where they get a Texans team where CJ Stroud absolutely implodes, and now they get a Broncos team without much at quarterback. So like, they're going to have one of the easier paths to the Super Bowl. And it does feel like the Rams or the Seahawks are going to be a little bit more of a wake up call for them once they get to that big game.
Oh, 100%. Especially, I have championed the Rams throughout most of the season. They've been my favorite. They've been my number one team. They've been the team that I think is going to win the Super Bowl for a few months now. But Seattle, man, they just look like an absolute buzzsaw. But with that in mind, We're talking about the New England Patriots and their win over the Houston Texans. And as we look at the fallout from divisional weekend, one of the biggest questions of the weekend that jumped up is, what are the Texans going to do with CJ Stroud? Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Kicking off the year feeling good is the goal, right? And honestly, hydration is the easiest win. When I stay on top of it, my energy, focus, and mood are all up. But let's be real, plain water doesn't always cut it, especially when you're grinding through long days, hitting the gym, doing a bunch of podcasts, or just trying to stay consistent with your health goals. That's where Drip Drop comes in. Doctor developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better. Think clearer focus, better energy, elevated mood, and even that fresh skin glow. I absolutely love the Drip Drop. There are 16 original flavors, 8 zero sugar options, which is really important for me as somebody who's on that New Year diet. I can tell you for certain, not just me, but my lady as well loves the grape flavor from Drip Drop. And right now, Drip Drop is offering my listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Again, that's dripdrop.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 20% off. Stock up now at dripdrop.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts so you can apply them to the bets you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boosts give you more juice on the bets that you already like instead of forcing you to bet on something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You can make your picks and then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs keep rolling. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL, looking at the fallout from a crazy divisional round weekend in the NFL. We talked about Buffalo firing the wrong guy. We talked about Denver being doomed with Jarrett Stidham. Now I want to talk about one of the bigger questions from the weekend, and that's the Houston Texans have a problem, and it's CJ Stroud. We got to go to my guy, John Hickman from Locked On Texans, for his reaction after that miserable loss.
Texan fans, the season ends on a heartbreaker, fueled by just a god-awful performance from quarterback CJ Stroud. There's no way around it. I'm John Hickman of the Locked On Texans podcast, your team every day. It wasn't like Houston wasn't in this game. It wasn't like they did not have an opportunity to pull in closer than what they were. At one point, Houston had the lead. But when it all came down, throughout the week, I talked about, hey, this game is going to come down to which quarterback plays better than the other. A lot of people slept on the Patriots defense, and we know how ferocious this Houston Texans defense is. But when it was all said and done, Trek made 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. CJ Stroud, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, a fumble at that. He just wasn't good, and he wasn't good enough for the Houston Texans to get over the hump. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and check out the Locked On Texans podcast every day this week as I continue to cover your team every day.
CJ Stroud is the first player in postseason history to have 5 interceptions and 5 fumbles in the same postseason, and he only played in 2 games. I said it on yesterday's show, but I saw a crazy stat online. Wish I could give credit to the guy who I saw the video from, but he made a great point that in Stroud's 3 playoff wins in his career, his defense has given up 32 points, and his defense has scored 32 points. So basically, Stroud has had to do nothing and would have played to a tie in those games. He has really fallen off from his first year. Now you're starting to, the damage control is happening where you're starting to hear the reports of, hey, he bumped heads with Bobby Slowick, and that's why they got rid of Slowick, and Slowick would challenge him to do things his way, and Stroud just wanted everything to be the terminology from Ohio State, and there are questions about whether CJ Stroud is capable of learning the offense properly and whether he's committed to the offseason with all the different things that he's been involved with. Look, I don't think the Texans can bail on CJ Stroud quite yet, but I think next year is a true proving ground for CJ Stroud's viability going forward for Houston. And if you would have said that after his rookie year, people would have looked at you like you were nuts.
Yeah, I think the key here is that this isn't just like one implosion game where it's like everyone has a bad, not everyone, but like plenty of players have had just a bad disaster game every once in a while that's just a blip in the radar, but otherwise they're pretty good. But this has been a growing trend, and not only just multiple playoff games, with all the fumbles against Steelers and all the picks in this last one, but even earlier this season, every time they played a really good defense, like he couldn't step up and overcome. He struggled a lot against Seattle this season. There was another game later in the year. I'm struggling to remember my Texans schedule that well off the top of my head, but they've had a couple of games where like he puts up some stinkers against some of the better opponents that they face, especially the better defenses they face. And this dates back even a year before. And it was easy to blame coordinators in the past, but eventually when it becomes more and more obvious on the quarterback making mistakes, it's like, well, you got to look inward. And I think Houston has to have some really tough conversations with themselves. And also I think they have to get to the point where, hey, there's no questions about O-line or weapons or play calling running game, and just eliminate any other doubt. And where you're left with the only answer is quarterback's not good enough.
And the problem is that we're almost there, because they have really great weapons. And even though Nico Collins was out and Dalton Schultz got banged up during the game, like they just drafted a bunch of wide receivers. They had Christian Kirk. They have depth at wide receiver, some of the best depth in the NFL. The run game actually wasn't too bad with Woody Marks and Nick Chubb throughout the season. They've changed offensive coordinators. They made a bunch of changes on the offensive line. They drafted Ariante Ursary. They traded and signed guys on the interior. Like they have literally made all the possible changes. And quite honestly, the Texans are just too good of a football team to have to deal with this. If they had Drake May, they might win the Super Bowl this year. You know what I mean? Like, and that is when both those guys were drafted, in the top three, Stroud going number 2, May going number 3 to the Patriots. It's like, it's hard to look at what Caleb Williams did this week, and it's hard to look at what Drake May has done, and it's hard to look at even, the season that Jaden Daniels has had. And I got to give credit to Louis. He mentioned yesterday, look at Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and how they're just going opposite directions right now. And it's just crazy to see. I mean, at some point, there's nothing else that they can do. That's why I think one of the big narratives that you're going to hear on this show throughout as I spin my media narrative web, you know what I mean? The dirty media spinning the narrative. One of the narratives that I'm going to be spinning all season long is this is a now or never season for CJ Stroud. If he were to come out and have a bad year and they were to miss the playoffs, or if they go back to the playoffs and he tanks them again, like this performance in the playoffs, it really is one of those where like, no, that was on CJ Stroud. Like he just absolutely blew it. It's not as convoluted as it normally is.
And it's especially tricky with Davis Mills breathing over his shoulder, right? Like they know that
he's a good backup.
Exactly. Like I was just thinking, I was going to ask you, like, do the Texans win that game if Jared Stidham's starting? But they've got a better option on their own bench in Davis Mills. Like, yeah, I know they weren't in a position to do that benching mid game because it symbolizes so much. You kind of like derailing the rest of his you're waving a white flag on the rest of his Texans
too early
up on him there. Yeah. Like if I'm Houston, I feel pretty good about the idea that I can go into next season with those two guys, and if Stroud does implode, not that Davis Mills is going to become your franchise quarterback, but he can at least get you by to the next offseason to be the bridge to whatever your next quarterback's going to be.
No, that makes a ton of sense. They can win games with Davis Mills with how good that team is, and if Stroud just didn't make so many mistakes, they at least would have been closer than what they ended up being. But Lauren, before we do go, I got to go one more story of the fallout here, and it's not quite as juicy as maybe some of the other ones, but got to get the expert opinion. My take after the game was the Chicago Bears don't need to do anything drastic. They just need to keep building, do things smart. Do you see any massive change or even slightly massive change that the Bears need to consider to try to push them to the next level?
The only thing would be with their pass rush, right? If they can find a way to revamp that a little bit, they put a bunch.
Would that be a big trade? Maybe a Max Crosby trade? Would you consider that? Would you give up the first round picks? If you had to give up 2 first round picks to get Max Crosby, you think the Bears are in a position to do that, like they did with Khalil Mack not too long ago?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to give up 2 first round picks because you do want to keep. I mean, it's tricky because the Bears. It depends on what else you give up because the Bears have a ton of money in Dio Dengbo, the free agent they signed this past offseason, who tears Achilles and is probably going to miss all next year.
After coming off a torn Achilles when he was in college, too.
And so you have like 20 million in him, you have 20 million in Montez Sweat. So like you can't just add Max Crosby's salary and have 3 pass rushers worth. So you got to find a way to like shed some salary there. Like you can talk me into a Max Crosby deal, but there has to be a lot of movement around there. And the other thing I'll throw in real quick is like they could lose some multiple members of their coaching staff. Sounds like Eric Bieniemy is going to the Chiefs as offensive coordinators, kind of been written in the stars for a while now. Al Harris has been the secret to all their turnovers. He could get hired away as a defensive coordinator. There's a lot of different names on that coaching staff that could depart, and that could be a big change for them also.
No, for sure. Well, there's one move that I know the Bears need to make. Better bring back the mayor of Murfreesboro, Kevin Byard. What a great football player. You don't say anything, Lauren. I'll fight you. That's my favorite Tennessee Titans player of all time. I don't care what the people say. He's a Hall of Fame safety in the modern NFL. That's a real baller right there. And I hope that Byard wants to go. And it sounds like he wants to go back. He's really high on Caleb Williams. Said that's a franchise quarterback, and that's going to attract a lot of guys to Chicago. So I think it's important for Chicago to try to keep that nucleus together in the secondary that honestly had a pretty good playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, they came together at the very end in a way they hadn't played all season.
They got healthy.
Both Byard and Jaquan Brisker are free agents at the same time. So they got to kind of figure out, like, you don't want to lock up Byard to a long-term deal because he's old, but you love to have him back for another year or 2. But Brisker's had concussions every year except this year. So then do you trust him? Like, they have some real serious conversations to be had and not a ton of extra salary cap space to do it with.
And that's why you got to get subscribed, stay subscribed to Locked On Bears. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, Lauren Cox. As we tell you every episode, thanks for tuning in and stay safe out there.